sad. Just unbelievable sadness.
We need to start with what just happened because this is no longer random internet chatter. This is major headline news. NBC News reports that Bill Gates acknowledged having extramarital relationships during his marriage. The Times of Israel also reported that he admitted to connections with 2 Russian women and described his association with Epstein as a serious mistake. That part is confirmed. So let's keep this straight. He has acknowledged the affairs. He has openly said meeting Epstein was a major error in judgment. What he has not confirmed are the more explosive claims circulating in certain communications linked to Epstein, including allegations that he contracted a health issue and allegedly sought medication in a way that would not raise attention at home. Those specific claims remain allegations, not confirmed facts, and that distinction matters a lot. Before diving deeper into the Epstein-linked discussions, it's important to remember the level of influence Gates held for decades. For nearly 20 years, Bill Gates was considered the wealthiest person on the planet. Not just wealthy, but almost untouchable wealthy. He publicly pledged to give away most of his fortune through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, one of the largest charitable foundations in history. He built a reputation as the model modern billionaire. He even received an honorary knighthood from the British Crown and was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by Barack Obama in 2005. That was the image. That was the brand. And now that image is facing serious scrutiny. He was everywhere. Magazine covers, global conferences, award stages. Bill Gates wasn't just known as a tech genius, he was framed as a global humanitarian icon. He became the blueprint for what a good billionaire was supposed to look like. Then the pandemic hit. For years, Gates had warned that the world wasn't ready for a major global health crisis. When COVID arrived, he was suddenly front and center. Interviews, virtual panels, global health summits, funding vaccine research.
Unbelievable sadness, right? And again, I'm able to take my own sadness and look at those young girls and say, my God, how did they...
His foundation was deeply involved in international health initiatives, and many people treated him like a de facto authority on public health. Supporters said this proved he had foresight. Critics said it looked like overreach. They argued he wasn't elected, yet his influence was massive. Online theories exploded, claiming he was benefiting financially from vaccines or using health programs for control. At the time, most of that was dismissed as fringe speculation. But what's reshaping his reputation now isn't online rumor. It's documented history. By 2021, the carefully built image was already cracking. Gates and Melinda French Gates announced they were ending their marriage after 27 years. In a joint statement, they said they no longer believed they could grow together as a couple in the next phase of life. To the public, it felt sudden. For decades, they had represented stability. Gates had long been portrayed as the brilliant Harvard dropout who co-founded Microsoft and helped shape modern computing. That's where he met Melinda. He was the CEO. She was a product manager. She initially declined his advances, but he persisted. When the relationship became serious, he famously made a pros and cons list about whether marriage would interfere with running Microsoft. That detail alone said a lot. They married in Hawaii. Melinda left Microsoft 2 years later to focus on raising their 3 children. For years, their public image was disciplined, steady, polished. Then the divorce shifted everything. In 2019, the Wall Street Journal reported that Microsoft had opened an internal investigation into an alleged past relationship Gates had with an employee nearly 2 decades earlier. Shortly after, he stepped down from Microsoft's board. During a CBS interview, questions about infidelity surfaced. When asked if there had been more than one instance, Melinda's response was measured but revealing.
Moment or one specific thing that happened. There just came a point in time where there was enough there that I realized it just wasn't healthy and I couldn't trust.
Later, the New York Times reported that Gates had pursued women on multiple occasions, including sending an email to an employee asking her to dinner and writing, "If this makes you uncomfortable, pretend it never happened." That sentence alone sparked serious reactions. But according to multiple reports, what unsettled Melinda most wasn't just the relationships, it was Epstein. Melinda has said she met Epstein once and later described him as deeply disturbing. She made it clear she was uncomfortable with her husband's association with someone who had a prior conviction involving misconduct with a minor and who was required to register as a love offender. Here's the timeline that matters. A New York Times investigation found that Gates met with Epstein multiple times beginning in 2011. That was years after Epstein's 2008 conviction related to soliciting from a minor. Despite that history being public record, meetings reportedly continued. During one reported meeting at his Manhattan townhouse, Epstein allegedly minimized his past actions, comparing them to something trivial. Gates has since acknowledged that meeting Epstein was a serious mistake in judgment, and that admission now sits at the center of a much larger conversation about judgment, influence, and the cost of association. But when you combine that public admission with the resurfaced Epstein-related emails, the ones alleging Russian relationships and claims about discreet medical requests, the situation stops looking like a simple lapse in judgment. That's where this story shifts from reputation damage to something much deeper: legacy damage. Bill Gates built a global image around intellect, innovation, and massive philanthropy. For decades, he wasn't just respected, he was elevated. But reputations aren't built only on what someone creates. They're shaped by the private choices made behind closed doors. And now, whether he wants it or not, those choices are part of the public conversation. Gates has said he met with Epstein because Epstein had connections to wealthy individuals who might support.
I've said I regretted having those dinners, and there's absolutely nothing new on that.
Is there a lesson for you, for anyone else looking at this?
Well, he's dead, so in general, you always have to be careful.
Support global health initiatives. That was the official explanation. However, Gates is now one of many high-profile names appearing across large batches of Epstein-related communications that have resurfaced in recent years. In emails that Epstein reportedly drafted to himself in July 2013, he claimed he assisted Gates in obtaining medication following encounters with Russian women and suggested he helped facilitate certain private meetings. In another message, Epstein wrote that Gates allegedly asked for emails referencing a reported health concern to be deleted and sought antibiotics that could be given discreetly to Melinda. It is crucial to emphasize that these claims originate from Epstein's own communications and have not been publicly confirmed by Gates. Still, the association alone has created significant public backlash. Even unverified claims can carry weight when attached to already controversial relationships. Gates built his name on innovation and large-scale philanthropy few individuals in modern history can match. Through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, billions have been directed toward global health, education, and poverty initiatives. That impact is measurable, but public legacy is not shaped only by charitable giving or technological breakthroughs. It is also shaped by judgment, and regardless of how impactful the foundation's work has been, these personal decisions are now inseparable from the broader narrative surrounding him. Stories like this highlight how complex it can be to separate confirmed facts from allegations, and how influence and power often intersect in ways the public doesn't fully see. To understand how we got here, it's important to zoom out. Questions about Gates' influence and wealth didn't begin with Epstein. They go back decades, especially during Microsoft's dominance in the tech industry.
As a society, right? No girl should ever be put in the situation that they were put in by Epstein and whatever was going on with all of the various people around him. So whatever questions remain there of what I can't even begin to know all of it, those questions are for those people and for even my ex-husband. They need to answer to those things.
In 1998, Gates and Microsoft faced major antitrust accusations from U.S. regulators who argued the company violated monopoly laws. Gates was required to testify in court, and the case became a major media spectacle. Around the same time, the dot-com bubble burst, sending Microsoft's share price sharply downward and placing the company under intense pressure. Microsoft survived, largely because of its size and market position, but the case marked a turning point. Gates was no longer seen as the untouchable tech visionary. That perception shift was real. During and after that period, Gates increasingly focused on philanthropy and long-term reputation building. Over the years, the foundation distributed significant funding, including hundreds of millions of dollars, toward media-related initiatives. Grants went to outlets such as CNN and NBC News, along with journalism associations and international reporting groups. Those grants are publicly disclosed. However, as As with many large foundations, the exact downstream impact of funding streams is often complex and not always fully transparent to the average observer. All of this paints a bigger picture. This isn't just about one meeting or one headline. It's about how power, influence, philanthropy, and private decisions intersect, and how quickly a carefully built image can face serious reevaluation. Funding often extends beyond direct media grants. When large foundations support medical journals, research institutions, and academic centers, those organizations can influence public reporting in indirect ways.
Children are suffering from preventable diseases. It was a huge mistake to spend time with him, to give him the credibility. I never went to the island. I never met any women, and I regret,
Because of that, some analysts argue the broader financial footprint shaping global narratives could exceed the publicly cited $320 million in media-related grants. That context helps explain why for years, Bill Gates received overwhelmingly positive coverage, even as controversies quietly circulated in the background. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has also played a major role in global health policy. Outside of national governments like the United States and China, the foundation has ranked among the largest contributors to the World Health Organization. Financial support at that scale naturally brings influence in shaping funding priorities and policy discussions. Supporters see that as leadership. Critics see concentrated power. Both perspectives exist. At the same time, despite billions donated through philanthropy, Gates's personal net worth has at least doubled since the 1990s. His investments expanded well beyond technology into sectors like energy, infrastructure, and agriculture. By 2021, Gates became the largest private agricultural landowner in the United States, controlling over 269,000 acres through subsidiaries including Cascade Investment LLC. Many of those land purchases accelerated during the economic slowdown tied to the COVID period when farmland prices softened. Initially, those acquisitions were linked to anonymous entities. Investigative reporting later connected them to Gates. After that disclosure, the purchases were described as long-term agricultural investments. Still, controlling farmland at that scale carries influence over food production, supply chains, and farming practices. That level of ownership naturally raises eyebrows. Gates has also funded research into genetically modified crops and has publicly supported alternative and lab-based meat technologies. Depending on perspective, those moves can look like forward-thinking innovation or deeper consolidation of influence within food systems.
We need to create a world where no children are suffering from preventable diseases. I look forward to seeing the progress we'll unlock together. Thank you.
The timing has also drawn attention. Reports indicate that farmland acquisitions accelerated around 2011, the same period when meetings between Gates and Epstein reportedly began. Several years after Epstein's 2008 conviction involving misconduct with a minor, Gates has consistently stated that his meetings with Epstein were centered on philanthropy, global health initiatives, and discussions about potential charitable funding. That has been his explanation. However, those meetings occurred well after Epstein's conviction was already public knowledge. For many observers, that continued association is difficult to overlook. Public reporting around 2019 intensified scrutiny of those meetings. Around that same period, Gates's marriage was coming to an end. Melinda French Gates later made it clear she was uncomfortable with the relationship. She publicly stated that she expressed her concerns directly. Her discomfort was serious, and it eventually became part of the public record. There were also media reports suggesting Gates sometimes met with Epstein during periods of tension in his marriage. Gates has repeatedly described the association as a mistake and a lapse in judgment. Critics, however, argue that multiple meetings over several years are harder to frame as a single misstep. During a PBS interview, when pressed about Epstein's background, Gates again acknowledged that the connection was wrong. More recently, reporting from NBC News indicated that Gates admitted to having extramarital relationships while continuing to deny any criminal misconduct. Other outlets reported that he acknowledged relationships with Russian women. The distinction remains important. Gates has admitted to affairs and has admitted that meeting Epstein was a serious mistake. He has denied deeper wrongdoing. However, when those admissions are viewed alongside resurfaced Epstein-linked communications, including unverified claims drafted in Epstein's own messages referencing Russian encounters and medical concerns, the broader narrative.
Her last day as co-chair of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, it has an endowment that is valued at more than $67 billion, making it one of the world's largest charitable organizations. Of course, this comes against the backdrop of the highly publicized divorce between the two, which was finalized 3 years ago in 2021. Of course, Bill and Melinda Gates met in 1987 when Melinda Gates was an employee at Microsoft, and of course Gates was the CEO of the company. They married 6 years later and stayed married for about 27 years until they announced their separation. Of course, later reports emerged that Bill Gates had been unfaithful during pursuing affairs with women, including women that worked for him at.
Becomes more complicated. Even without confirmed evidence of criminal activity, the optics alone have damaged the image Gates spent decades building. As Gates's personal reputation has shifted, questions have also emerged about the long-term trajectory of Microsoft itself. For most of its history, Microsoft symbolized dominance and relentless innovation. It defined the personal computing era, but in the last decade, some initiatives have struggled. The Windows Phone is one widely cited example of a major project that failed to gain traction. To be fair, Microsoft has achieved major success in cloud computing and gaming. Its Azure platform remains a powerful competitor in enterprise technology. Still, critics argue the company no longer drives cultural or technological revolutions the way it once did. The operating systems that once reshaped the PC landscape now evolve more gradually. The disruptive spark that defined its early years feels less intense. Taken together, this story is no longer about one meeting or one headline. It's about influence, philanthropy, wealth, private judgment, and the long-term consequences of association. For decades, Gates stood at the top of both the tech world and the philanthropic world. Now, those worlds are being examined under a much harsher light. When you step up,
The philanthropy for global health through contacts that he had might emerge. When it looked like that wasn't a real thing, that relationship ended. But it was a huge mistake to spend time with him, to give him the credibility of being there. There were lots of others in that same situation, but I made a mistake. Definitely a very sad milestone. Melinda's a great person, and that partnership that we had coming to an end is a source of great personal sadness. We are communicating and working at the foundation, and so that partnership we're going to try and
back and look at the full arc of this story, it becomes clear that this is not about one headline or one uncomfortable interview moment. It is about how power, wealth, and reputation evolve over time, and how quickly perception can change when new layers are exposed. For decades, Bill Gates existed in two parallel worlds. In one, he was the tech pioneer who helped build Microsoft into a global empire. In the other, he was the philanthropic visionary directing billions through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation toward global health, poverty reduction, and education reform. Those two identities reinforced each other for years. Innovation created wealth, wealth funded philanthropy. Philanthropy strengthened reputation. It looked airtight, but influence at that scale always attracts scrutiny, and when scrutiny intensifies, it rarely focuses on just one issue. It starts connecting dots. It revisits old controversies. It re-examines timelines. The resurfaced Epstein-related communications did not emerge in isolation. They entered an environment where Gates's image was already under pressure. The divorce announcement, the confirmed affairs, the board resignation, each event chipped away at the polished exterior that had defined him for decades. By the time allegations tied to Epstein's private communications began circulating more widely, the public was no longer looking at Gates through the same lens. It is important to keep repeating what is confirmed versus what remains alleged. Gates has admitted to extramarital relationships. He has publicly acknowledged that meeting Epstein was a serious mistake in judgment. He has denied any criminal misconduct. The more explosive claims, including references in Epstein's drafts about medical concerns or facilitating personal matters, have not been publicly confirmed by Gates. That line matters. Yet public perception does not operate only on confirmed legal findings. It operates on narrative momentum. Once a respected figure is linked repeatedly to controversy, even indirectly, the cumulative weight changes how people interpret everything else. Another factor shaping this conversation is scale. Gates is not just wealthy, he is among the wealthiest individuals in modern history. His investments span technology, agriculture, energy, infrastructure, and health. Through philanthropic channels, his foundation has funded research institutions, media initiatives, and global partnerships. When someone holds that much reach across multiple sectors, every association carries amplified significance. Supporters argue that large-scale philanthropy naturally requires networking with powerful individuals, including people whose reputations may later become problematic. They frame the Epstein meetings as a strategic miscalculation, not a coordinated effort tied to wrongdoing. Critics, however, question why meetings continued after Epstein's prior conviction was already public knowledge. They argue that judgment at that level should be sharper, not looser. This tension between strategic networking and ethical boundaries sits at the heart of the debate. There is also a broader cultural shift happening. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, tech leaders were often viewed as visionary builders who could solve global problems. By the 2020s, that trust had eroded. The public became more skeptical of concentrated influence, especially when unelected individuals shape policy conversations. Gates's role in global health discussions during the pandemic amplified both admiration and suspicion at the same time. When trust erodes, past decisions are revisited through a harsher lens. Meetings that once seemed like routine networking now appear questionable. Philanthropic influence that once looked benevolent now sparks debates about power consolidation. Large land acquisitions once described as smart investments now trigger discussions about food system control. The context shifts and everything looks different. The timeline also fuels conversation. Reports indicate that Gates's meetings with Epstein began years after Epstein's 2008 conviction involving misconduct with a minor. That detail is central. It is not about speculation, it is about chronology. Critics argue that continuing engagement after that point reflects a serious lapse in discernment. Gates has responded by calling the meetings a mistake, but repetition over several years makes that explanation harder for some observers to accept as a one-time error. Meanwhile, Microsoft continues operating as a technology giant. Under new leadership, it has pivoted aggressively into cloud computing and artificial intelligence. Financially, the company remains powerful, but culturally, the aura surrounding its co-founder has undeniably shifted. Gates is no longer seen purely as the untouchable architect of modern computing. He is now a complex public figure navigating reputational fallout, and reputation, once fractured, rarely returns to its original state. What makes this situation particularly significant is that Gates spent decades actively shaping his legacy. Philanthropy was not an afterthought, it was central to how he wanted to be remembered. Large pledges to give away wealth, global vaccination campaigns, educational reform initiatives, climate investment strategies. The narrative was clear: transition from ruthless tech competitor to global problem solver. Now, that narrative competes with a different storyline. One centered on judgment, association, and private behavior that contradicts the public image of disciplined leadership. The long-term impact remains uncertain. Philanthropic projects continue, investments continue, Microsoft continues, but public memory is selective and emotional. Often it condenses complex lives into a handful of defining controversies. In many ways, this story illustrates how modern influence works. Wealth creates access, access creates relationships, relationships create risk. And in the digital age, nothing stays buried forever. Emails resurface, meeting logs reappear, statements are replayed, the timeline becomes searchable. Whether Gates's legacy ultimately tilts more toward innovation and philanthropy, or toward controversy and questionable associations, will depend on how future revelations unfold, and how transparent responses remain. For now, what is undeniable is this: the image that once seemed untouchable is now under sustained examination. And once that process begins, it rarely slows down. The bigger picture here isn't just about one meeting, one controversy, or even one divorce. It's about how power, influence, reputation, and legacy collide over decades. Bill Gates spent years shaping the image of a visionary tech founder who transformed into a global philanthropist. That transformation became central to how he wanted to be remembered. But legacy isn't built on charity work alone. It's shaped by judgment, it's shaped by associations, it's shaped by how someone responds when difficult questions surface. Corporate success and large donations matter, but so does public accountability. And once public trust starts to crack, rebuilding it is never simple. So now the conversation shifts to you. Do you think Gates's reputation has been permanently damaged, or do you believe his philanthropic impact outweighs the controversies tied to his associations and personal decisions? There are strong opinions on both sides, and this debate isn't going away anytime soon. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you made it this far, hit the like button so more people can see this breakdown. Share this video with anyone following the Gates and Epstein developments, and if you're new here, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive. I'll see you in the next one.